Richard Milhouse Nixon was born on January 9th, 1913, in Yorba Linda, California. His childhood was met with both tragedy and triumph. Early on, he lost both of his brothers. However, during high school, he qualified for Harvard University. Unfortunately, he was not able to attend because his parents were too poor to send him. In response, he went to Whittier College, a Quaker institution. Following his years at Whittier, Richard Nixon was able to get a full scholarship to Duke University, where he studied law. Finally, the door was wide open for Richard Nixon to enter the realm of United States politics. Nixon was first elected into the House of Representatives in 1946. By 1952, Nixon won the Republican Party's vice president nomination and served under Dwight D. Eisenhower. In 1960, Nixon ran against John F. Kennedy but lost. Finally, in 1968, he campaigned against Democrat Hubert Humphrey. Making himself known as a calm amidst the storm and promised a peace with honor end to the Vietnam War, he won the election by 500,000 votes and was sworn in as the 37th President of the United States on January 20th, 1969. Once in office, Nixon began to implement new policies to help domestic issues. One of these included New Federalism, a system which directed money and power away from the federal bureaucracy towards state and municipalities. Also, he included revenue sharing, which redirected funds to the state and municipal levels. In 1970, he passed the Clean Air Act and also created the Department of Natural Resources and the Environmental Protection Agency in order to protect and harness America's natural resources. Moving on to foreign policy, Nixon agreed to the first SALT agreement in 1972 with Leonid Brezhnev of the Soviet Union to decrease the amount of nuclear arms being built in both the United States and the USSR. He was also the first president to visit the People's Republic of China and drove nearly 1 billion Chinese people out of isolation. Also in 1972, he signed the Paris Peace Accords, which officially ended the war between the United States and Vietnam. However, he continued to fund the South Vietnamese government and also bombed Cambodia, which led to destabilization in that region. Nixon also supported Israel with massive aid during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. However, this led to OPEC nations to create an Arab oil embargo against the United States, which has an oil crisis for the American people. As more facts about the Watergate scandal continued to surface, people's distrust in the U.S. government greatly fell. It became so bad that by August 8, 1974, Nixon had to resign from office. Following his resignation, he founded the Richard Nixon Foundation, which was created to take care of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library in Yorba Linda, California. Richard Milhouse Nixon passed away on April 22, 1994, at the age of 81.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are listening today, this is the interview with the former President of the United States, Richard Milhouse Nixon. How are you this evening?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Now let's start off with your childhood. Tell me about your early years.
Well, I was born on my family's farm in California, and it was when I was a child where my two brothers died that I felt a need to lead people, and that's what led me to get my law degree at Duke University, and I wanted to become part of politics so I could be in that government range to lead people and to direct people.
And to help people.
To help people, yes.
How did you go about desegregating schools in the South?
Well, I appointed my vice president, then Vice President Spiro T. Agnew, and we started a controlled plan of how to. It wasn't going to be a simple plan, so we started to get an idea of what we were to do in states such as Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. You know, the countries that really needed it and they were in trouble.
Thank you. Now let's go on to foreign policy. Describe the relationship that you wanted between America and the Soviet Union.
Well, we both had so many nuclear armaments, and I felt the need that we needed to take away some of them. I think that we had too many, they had too many, and I wanted to have a more peaceful relationship with them. And I think having too many nuclear armaments would things would be too tense during this Cold War, and we needed to tone it down a little bit, I believe.
And that led to the SALT I agreement.
Yes, in 1972.
And now moving on to another large communist country, China. It was a shock to many, to people in America, especially people in China, that you decided to open up relations with them. Why?
Yes.
And why did you visit them?
Well, as you mentioned, they were also communists, so I felt that we would have a tense relationship with them as we did with Russia. So I believe visiting them and opening up relationships, opening up trade with them would, we would have a better relationship with them, and we wouldn't be in a conflict such as the Cold War as we were with Russia.
Now let's move on to one of the more touchier subjects, the Watergate scandal. Now, there is substantial evidence that you ordered the break-in at the Democratic National Committee. You ordered 7 burglars to go in and break in and bug the Democratic National Committee in order to gain information. It was organized by your campaign re-election members. And there's also evidence that you covered it up, substantial evidence. Why?
I honestly can't answer that question to its fullest. I mean...
Are you sure about that, Mr. President?
Yes.
Well, thanks for a good interview for all of those who are listening tonight. The former President of the United States, Richard Milhouse Nixon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Gerald Rudolph Ford was born on July 14, 1913 in Omaha, Nebraska. He was initially named Leslie Lynch King Jr., but later changed his name after his mother divorced his biological father and moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan. He attended the University of Michigan where he played football. However, instead of being drafted into the NFL, he decided to study economics at Yale after learning that his mother had been domestically abused by his biological father. After returning home from World War II, Ford decided to run for congressman of the 5th District of Michigan. After winning, Ford and his wife moved to Washington, D.C., where they would live for the next 30 years. During his time in Congress, Ford worked on foreign policy, military spending, the space program, and the Warren Commission. By his 13th term, which was to end in 1976, Ford considered retirement as he felt that his goal of becoming Speaker of the House was out of reach at that point. However, on October 10, 1973, Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned, and Ford was nominated to take his place. Therefore, after Richard Nixon resigned from office, Gerald Ford was sworn in as the 30th President of the United States on August 9, 1974. At the time Ford came into office, the United States was struggling with inflation, unemployment, and numerous other domestic issues. In response, Ford opposed welfare and affirmative action as a means of fixing the problems of the economy. Instead, he focused on Whip Inflation Now, shortened to WIN, which encouraged Americans to practice better spending habits in order to help decrease inflation. He also had to use the veto power many times since there was a mainly Democratic Congress. He also supported the 26th Amendment, which made it legal for 18-year-olds to vote. He also supported programs that helped the disadvantaged youth and signed amendments to the Equal Opportunity Credit Act, which prevented discrimination as a way to not allow people to obtain credit unrelated to their credit worthiness. In 1974, Ford granted South Vietnam billions of dollars in aid to help continue the fight against the Communist North. In 1975, Ford signed the Helsinki Peace Accords with the Soviet Union, which required both countries, especially the latter, to recognize the civil rights of the subjects living under their sphere. In 1975, Saigon fell to the Communists, and Americans needed to be evacuated. However, Khmer Rouge forces from Cambodia captured 38 Americans. In response, Ford ordered a covert special forces unit to extract them. Also, Ford reformed the CIA, which, after the Watergate scandal, involved itself in domestic operations. This was a clear violation of its mandate, which was to only conduct covert counterintelligence operations overseas. Overall, Ford's pardoning of Nixon is considered to be one of the most controversial aspects of the Watergate scandal. This is because many Americans cannot accept the fact that Richard Nixon would go without a trial. Also, Ford tried to help the failing economy of the United States through programs such as WIN. Unfortunately, he did not have enough time in office to really make a lasting impact. Because of this, he lost the 1976 election to Democrat Jimmy Carter. Ford died on December 26, 2006, at the age of 93. This is the oldest age that a United States president has ever lived to be.
Hello, today I'm with former President Gerald R. Ford. Hello, Mr. President.
Hello.
Now, tell me about your life.
Well, I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and during high school, I became really good at football and was almost drafted into the NFL. However, during high school, I also learned that my biological father had abused my mother, and she really could do nothing about this. So I became inspired to go to college to study law and politics to hopefully make a difference in the lives of others.
How do you think you made a difference in America?
During my time as president, which wasn't very long, I tried to basically get America moving towards the future. I wanted to end the hostilities of the Watergate conflict, Watergate scandal, I wanted to basically wrap up Vietnam, and I really just wanted to get America looking forward to the future to try and tackle our economy and get things going in the right direction.
What was your reaction when South Vietnam fell?
After South Vietnam fell, I really had to basically remove all Americans from that area, as obviously they were pretty much targets for any strict communist groups. And unfortunately, during the evacuation of these Americans, 38 of them were captured by Khmer Rouge, which was a Cambodian communist party. In response, I sent in special forces to remove them, and thankfully they all came home safely.
Many Americans were angry after you pardoned Nixon. Why did you pardon Nixon?
I pardoned Richard Nixon because, like I said before, my main goal was to get America moving in the right direction. I wanted to end the Watergate scandal completely. I didn't want people thinking about the past. I wanted them thinking about the future. Had Nixon gone to court and been prosecuted, the media and the public would have just continued to spiral out of control with obsession over the scandal. So by pardoning him and ending the scandal right there and there, my hope was to basically have America and the American public look forward to a better future.